not sure, I've always wanted to make my own anyway, to see could I. So instead of buying a box of 20 bottles for €20, when I'm finished I have 40 500ml bottles instead of 20 330ml bottles. So no matter what way you look at it, it's always better value. Basically what I'm doing today is an IPA, but it's a bastardized version of one I've made twice before because I don't have all the hops. Because the grain is very affordable, but sometimes the hops are just... Ow, cut that, will you? Sometimes the grain is very affordable, but sometimes the hops are just too fucking dear. Do you know when you're buying it? Because I buy it off a website and I always just try and keep it around €50 at a time. We'll call it Bastard IPA. Where's an IPA? Aha, there's an IPA. Boil for 75. Fuck. Usually I boil for about an hour. That was a very heavily hopped IPA though. Yeah, fuck this. I'm out of patience already. We'll just boil for 60. It usually runs over anyway. Check this shit out. Earthy, grassy. Centennial. I don't like that hop, which is why I don't fucking use it. So the hops give it flavour depending on what time you put it in the boil at and whether or not you add it to your brew as it's fermenting after today. They will add or take away or do different things to the flavour. So 30 grams of each. We'll go with 30 of Magnum. So all beer, I think all beer, any fucking beer I make anyway, uses a bitter and hop, and I always just use Magnum because I've used it a few times, it's handy. So throw that in at 60, so that just, because the beer has to be balanced. If you didn't use a bitter and hop, the beer just tastes wrong. The recipes can be very, very complicated and in-depth, and you have to add hops at 60 minutes and 45 and 20 and use 4 or 5 different kinds of hops to get all these complex flavors and things, which is great, but it obviously costs more and I don't really care because I found a recipe that it works. You tweak it, like I change it a wee bit from day to day depending on what hops I have available, and like the last 3 times I've brewed it, it has been excellent both on flavor and carbonation. And carbonation is a big thing for me because I love head and you need head. So this is my all-in-one brewing system, which is basically the fucking shit. This is the business. This is the Brew Monk. It's just better because this pipe is clear. It's graduated so I can see the part, which makes it very easy to clean. Herein lies the rub. I am a fucking cowboy. This bad boy is deadly, but it comes with a QR code to scan and get an instruction book, which I did not do. I know how to work it. You can set, this is so complicated, you can set programs, you can set times on it. I do none of that. I just do everything manually, step by step, because that's just how I roll. At the cooling down stage, you're at your most vulnerable. So your brew could potentially, you know, what's the word I'm looking for?
Spoil.
It could, yeah, like pick up germs or get infected. It could get infected, and then you throw your stuff in your fermenting bucket. And again, the longer you're at that, the more chance of, you know, something contaminating it and blah blah blah. Now, I've never had a spoiled brew yet, and I'm doing this 2 years. You're supposed to mash in at a certain volume of water, depending on your brew. There's a lot of science in it. I don't understand it. I don't give a shit. Like, the way I do it works for me, so it's A1. I basically just fire in between 15 and 20 litres, mash in with the grain. Like I said, it generally works. Actually, my second to last brew, I used tap water just to see would it make a difference, and in my own personal opinion, it did. The flavour wasn't quite what I was going for, and it was again a recipe I'd used before, so I know how it should have tasted, and it was still well drinkable. My beer is well drinkable. the grain basket here, which is deadly, so we just pop this bud. The beauty about this thing, the Brew Monk, is that it has a built-in pump, whereas my old kettle, the Bulldog, didn't. What I've done there now is set the temperature a good few degrees higher, because when we add the grain to the water, the temperature is going to drop. Love to be at the stage where my shed was in good enough shape where I could have 2 brews ready and 1 on the go, and that way you're always like in beer. You always have a beer to drink. Right, woo! Steamy windows. So we are now going to set that mofo down there. Now, this is called mashing in, and it is beautiful. Just give it a bit of a stir. See, can I get a couple of dough balls there, and you'll see. So basically you want to make sure the grain is well mixed in, and we don't want dough balls, so pouring it in big lumps like I just did can result in these fellas. See, get them up. So that's just a waste of grain, so you just mash that bugger up and go on about your business. Now look, that looks lovely. If only you could smell it. And what's deadly is, like, so I'm using about 4.5 kilos of grain here, and basically I have no use for it afterwards, so it goes in the bin, to be honest. But if you're into baking and things, there was a guy I seen one time, and he kept his grain after the mash and used it to make fucking bread. So, you know, you don't need to waste it. There are things you can do with it. This is called a mash, right? So we have our grain up to a certain temperature, and basically, as far as I can understand anyway, the idea behind this is to steep the grains in the water at a temperature that will take out as much sugar as possible out of it. Mix in various grains depending on your recipe with the water. You mash them at a certain temperature. So in our case, we're aiming for around 66 degrees, and that will soak out whatever enzymes and sugary bits and all that kind of crack. And then you drain off the grain, and the liquid that you're left with is called wort, and it will contain natural sugar then from all the grains. And to turn that into alcohol, you add yeast and you leave it to ferment for whatever length of time the recipe requires. So when we turn on our pump, it should filter the water. It's supposed to more evenly disperse the water, or the wort, or the mash across the top, so that it goes down through the grain bed in an even sort of a go. So that's basically us now for the next hour, mashing away. I generally give each beer its own name. So this is the Bastard IPA. The last one was a Hop to Fuck IPA, which was a bastardized version of my Paddy's Day IPA. That's so I'm trying to get the alcohol down to about 4.5 or 5%, just so you can sit down and enjoy 4 or 5 of them or whatever, you know. Because when it's 6.5% and you have 4 or 5 of them, then you have the crack. Especially when you give it to randomers and it blows its tits off. Great crack. Start with the top row. This is supposed to be elderflower champagne. I got the recipe off Getter Brewed, only I've left it in this thing probably too long, but I'll bottle it anyway, and if it tastes grand, I'll fucking drink it. No idea what percentage alcohol it's going to be. Don't know. There's only one way to find out. Drink it. I have Strasbourg ditch wine, which is basically strawberries and raspberries stuck in a blender mixed up with some water and mixed through with dandelion heads. Only the yellow parts though. So they have a natural yeast that causes it to ferment. Now the mead, on the other hand, you generally leave for months. Only I did make a boo-boo with the mead. I did it off the top of my head. I was very unprepared and I only used half the amount of honey you're supposed to use. So I'm gonna do some backwards maths on that and say half the honey means half the time. Herself, like I said earlier, we just had a baby boy a few weeks ago, and while she was pregnant she asked me to make her some rosé for after the wee man arrives, and this is it. So this is what's left out of 30 odd bottles. She didn't drink them all, I gave them to people. Garden shower by the fire pit there, 10:30, and Terence and his lovely lady friend scarpered off into the night, and I got a lovely text the next day saying, "Cheers Con, I brought a few bottles with me," and a picture of him in Donegal drinking with his Mrs. family my beer, which was deadly. Already nationwide and I haven't even started production. So a certain amount of it, the water will evaporate off, and there are people that know. I just wing it. I'm going to aim for anywhere between 20 and 25 litres, because when we finish boiling we're going to have to stick it in a fermenting vessel, and when it ferments we're going to be left with sediment, so we're going to lose a couple of litres that way as well. And I always just go for the maximum amount of beer possible. So fire this off to one side, then it can sit in that bucket there. Give it a go there now, so I will. You can taste the sweetness. It's actually not as sweet as the last one I tried, which can only be good because it means more of the sweetness is in here, and that's where we want it. We're getting this up to boil, so everything in here is going to be boiling for an hour. So it's grand. So once that hits boiling, we add our first hops, which is Magnum at 60. All this is minutes. You always count down to 0. So if you're adding at 45, you're adding with 45 minutes left in the boil. So we're adding at 60. Then we're adding Citra and Galaxy at 20. And then we're going to add them at 0 minutes. Right? So at 0 minutes, that's when we turn off the heat. People call it flame out, because when you use a gas boiler, you're flaming out. So at 20 minutes, it's still boiling. You're just turning off the heat so it'll start to cool. And give it a stir. Again, you add them at different stages of the boil to get different results from the hops. If you fired them all in at the one time, they'd all do the same job. So the longer they're in, it extracts more bitterness. That's what I gather. I could be wrong, I usually am. So what we want to achieve here now is a nice constant rolling boil, so the water is always boiling. Make sure I hook this on and not burn the fucking fingers off me. Jeez, the steam. Ah, you little bastard. Right, so hop spider in place. First edition Magnum hops. Get in there, you little shit. Now, A1, roll and boil achieved. Epic. Nicely done. Go on. So, now it's a matter of time. So, we have not much else to do until our 20 minutes. Now, at 20 minutes we're going to add our 2 hop additions. Then at between 20 and 15 I'm going to add one of these, which is a protoflock. Some fellas use Irish moss, some fellas use whirlflock. These are copper fining tablets. What they do is you throw it in, it breaks up and, you know, disperses through the wort, and then helps all the bigger lumps coagulate. Is that the right term? They all group together, they become heavier, and then they drop out of the liquid. So it's just to help have a clearer beer at the end, basically. I think that's what it does anyway. I could be completely wrong. It's a fucking year since I read anything about it, so it's just what I have been doing in all my brews, and hasn't let me down yet. Ooh. Feeling hot, hot, hot. So see the way there's bits of grain still in the wort. You can see it in that pipe. So that'll all settle out of it there in the fermenting bucket. So I'm going to click on the pump there now. And I'll just keep that circulating. And then this is us for the foreseeable. I usually just sit here and fiddle a guitar or something for a while. Simples. One man in a shed brewing, but there is a big social aspect to it because I'd make 40 bottles, I'd probably only fucking drink 10 of them. Mick down the road there, I actually promised him a couple of beers in my last brew, but it was that tasty I drank them. And it's a novelty, like anybody that comes visiting or whatever, like, I've made this, have a try. Maybe it's time. Second hop edition, 30 gram Citra, 30 gram Galaxy. In you go. It's fruity, citrusy. I love the aroma of those two hops now, to be fair. We're going to drop in this bad boy, which I hooked up off camera. This is our wort chiller. This plays a part in a few minutes. So I'm just going to drop it in there. Right, so I'm going to go turn on the cold water. Right, the cold water is going to flow through here into the wort chiller. Round and round it'll go. It'll come out here and expel into the sink, and that will cool the wort quicker. So we're at 15 minutes left now, so I'm gonna, now they say half of one, I fucking tend to fire in a whole one. Sure, why not? Drop it in there. Yeah, job done. And you'll see, you can feel the heat. That water's fucking roasting. It's cold going in though. Deadly. As soon as you get down to around 20 degrees, we're A1. Everything is a process. We're transferring the wort from the beer kettle into the bucket, which is our fermenting vessel. So we're letting it splash in to aerate the wort, because at this stage that's okay. But then we'll add some yeast and put the lid on it, and from that point on then its oxygen is not our friend. So the yeast will consume the sugar that is in the wort, producing alcohol but also producing carbon dioxide, which will lie on top of the wort because it's heavier, but it will also expel once it gets too much through our airlock, which is going to be in our lid. You'll see that in a minute. An airlock is a wee device we half fill with water so that the CO2 can escape but oxygen can't get in. Not right, wee man. I have them trained on the bottles already, don't I? That's 105.2, right? So this is called our original gravity. I'll write that down. What's today's date? 5th of August, right? So 0508. So we're born on, our OG is 1052, right? So we'll do a quick sum on that there in a few minutes, but right now I want to get the lid on this. So I am going to get this bad boy set up. So if you want a quick look there before we do anything, this is my fermenter. That's a heat mat. This is obviously a freezer. This is a temperature probe, goes on the outside of the bucket, and this bad boy controls it. But first things first, we'll pitch our yeast. Like, this is an 11.5 gram sachet, which is enough to do between 20 and 30 litres, it says so on the pack. And then we'll give it another fucking shake, sure, why not? And then, to get this up, that should be plenty. Now the gas can make its way up. The gas will push through the liquid, but oxygen won't push in. So this is the temperature probe for the wort. I'll just tape that on. The reason I have the cardboard on it is when it's chilling in here, because it's a freezer, I want the probe insulated from the freezer so that it's mostly measuring this. Handy enough feeling. Just get this set. There we go. Make sure it's centered on the oil heat pad. It is on good and tight. Now, pop you down. This is my Inkbird temperature controller, which arrived in the box, and the wee thing was feckin' cracked, which really annoyed me, but it is the best investment in my opinion in terms of home brewing. So I'm going to set it. So I'm going to set it for 20. Set it for 22 before. Set. A beer is good beer. You feel like a mad scientist some days, but it's right crack.